Run your tongue along the roof of your mouth. There is a taste there, bitter, faintly metallic, barely present until you look for it. That taste is a chemical signal, a rejection cue built into your species over millions of years. It tells you, without you thinking about it, when a liquid is wrong. 40,000 years ago, in a cave in northern Spain called El Sidrón, a Neanderthal died with plant fibers locked into her teeth. Poplar bark, yarrow, traces of a mould that produces penicillin. A team led by Weyrich published the analysis in the journal Nature in 2017. She was not drinking plain river water, or she was, and it killed her. The archaeology cannot say which. It can only say this. In Ice Age Europe, drinking water was the most dangerous act of the day. A Neanderthal woman at El Sidrón carried the same taste chemistry in her mouth that you carry in yours. Same receptors, same rejection cue. And she lived in a world where the water in front of her could kill her by the fourth sunrise. This is the story of what Neanderthals actually drank, and why the answer is written inside your body tonight. 3 promises before we go. A 48,000-year-old tooth that suggests Neanderthals were heating their water long before anyone farmed a grain. A genetic accident from 10 million years ago that has everything to do with your morning coffee and your local bar. And the honest reason the medieval no-water myth is wrong, and why the same lazy pattern keeps getting stapled onto Neanderthals every year they stay dead. Welcome to Fire and Bone. Start with the species. Homo neanderthalensis. Evolved in Europe and Western Asia. Persisted from roughly 400,000 years ago to about 40,000 years ago. Ice sheets to the north. Cold-adapted body. Brain volume, on average, larger than yours. They were not African. They were not desert people. Their range ran from Portugal to Siberia, across the coldest habitat any hominin has held onto. 300,000 years. 5 times longer than our species has existed as a species. Now, water. A cold climate landscape looks clean. Meltwater streams, glacial pools, cave springs. It looks safer than a Nile floodplain. It is not. Cold water carries Giardia, Cryptosporidium, E. coli, tapeworm eggs from carnivore droppings washed downstream, amoebic cysts that survive freezing. A Neanderthal at a spring in the Pyrenees faced a smaller germ load than a farmer in the Fertile Crescent 5,000 years later. But the load was there, and it was invisible. They had no germ theory, no microscopy, no vocabulary for contamination. What they had was memory. A child dies 4 days after the group camps by a still pond. A hunter dies of dysentery on a summer trail. The pattern gets stored, not as knowledge, as avoidance. So what did they drink instead? The answer sits inside their mouths, literally. Dental calculus is fossilized plaque, hardened bacterial biofilm. It traps everything a mouth touched in the days before death and preserves it for tens of thousands of years. Starch grains, plant fibers, pollen, microbial DNA. Under a microscope and a mass spectrometer, a Neanderthal tooth is a diary. That diary is the framework for this script. Every claim we make about Neanderthal drinking will be tested against what is locked inside their teeth. Not what a 19th century Frenchman imagined they did, not what a novelist projected onto them, what their own bodies preserved. The second framework runs under the first. A single enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase 4, ADH4. We will come back to it. Because a mutation in that enzyme 10 million years ago is the reason the story of Neanderthal drinks does not end when the Neanderthals ended. The teeth first. El Sidrón is a collapsed cave system in Asturias. In the year 2000, cavers found bones, Excavations began. By 2010, the site had produced 13 Neanderthal individuals, most of them from a single event around 49,000 years ago. Cut marks on the bones. Signs of cannibalism as aftermath. Not a scene we need to enter. We are here for the mouths. The Weyrich team sampled dental calculus from 5 Sidrón Neanderthals and compared it to calculus from Neanderthals at Spy Cave in Belgium. The Spy Neanderthals had eaten woolly rhinoceros and wild sheep, meat-heavy diet. Their calculus reflected it. The Sidrón calculus told a different story. Almost no meat signal. Instead, pine nuts, moss, mushrooms, and 2 compounds that stopped the researchers. Poplar bark, which contains salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin. Penicillium mould, the fungus that produces penicillin. One Sidrón Neanderthal had a dental abscess and a gut parasite, enterocytozoon. His calculus contained both compounds. He was self-medicating with a painkiller and an antibiotic. 40,000 years before Alexander Fleming. Picture a Neanderthal child dead by the 4th sunrise from a stream that looked exactly like the one you drank from on a hike last summer. That is the pressure driving what we find in these mouths. Every plant, every starch grain, every trace of resin is an answer to a problem that killed regularly. Back to the calculus. The Sidrón mouths did not contain river water bacteria. They contained plant infusions, ground plant matter mixed with liquid, something processed, something that had passed through a container or a mouth or both. That is not proof of tea. It is proof that these Neanderthals were not drinking straight from the stream and hoping. The second study is older. Amanda Henry, then at George Washington University, published in the journal PNAS in 2011. Her team analyzed starch grains preserved in dental calculus from Shanidar Cave in Iraq and Spy Cave in Belgium. They found cooked starches, barley, grass seeds, date palm, tubers, cooked, not raw. Starch grains change shape when they are heated in water. They swell. They gelatinize. Under a microscope, a cooked starch grain looks different from a raw one. Henry's team saw the swelling. In Neanderthal teeth, 46,000 years old. To gelatinize starch, you need water hot enough to activate the granule, around 60 to 70 degrees Celsius. To reach that temperature, you need a container and a fire. Neanderthals controlled fire. Abric Romani. Kebara. 200,000 years of hearths, some with intact combustion structures, ash lenses, stone circles. They did not have ceramic pots. Fired pottery does not appear in Europe for another 20,000 years after the last Neanderthal. But they had bark containers. They had hide bladders. They had the hot stone method, where stones are heated in a fire and dropped into liquid inside a lined pit. This method leaves no ceramic evidence and almost no archaeological trace. Modern experimental archaeology has replicated it with Neanderthal-era tools. If they were gelatinizing starches, they were heating water. If they were heating water, they were sterilizing it. Even if they did not know they were sterilizing it. That is the payoff on the first promise. A 48,000-year-old tooth full of cooked starch grains is a tooth that drank from a hot pot, not a cold stream. Now the harder question. Did Neanderthals ferment anything on purpose? Here we slow down. Fermentation of grains in the human record starts, as far as anyone has proven, with the Natufian mortars at Rockfet Cave in modern Israel, 13,000 years old. Li Lu of Stanford University published the analysis in 2018. Natufians were not Neanderthals. They were anatomically modern humans, tens of thousands of years after the last Neanderthal disappeared. But Neanderthals ate plants that ferment on their own. Fruit. Honey traces have been proposed at some sites, though the evidence is thin. Any pulp left overnight in a bark bucket in a warm cave with wild yeasts already living on the fruit skin becomes something mildly alcoholic without anyone doing anything. So the honest statement is this. There is no direct archaeological proof that Neanderthals fermented anything on purpose. There is proof they ate plants that would have fermented on their own. Whether they noticed the pattern is unknown. We cannot prove intent. We can prove pattern. Here is where a clean story needs breaking. You have probably heard, somewhere on the internet, that medieval Europeans never drank water, that they drank only beer and wine because all water was too dangerous. It is a clean story. It fits neatly into the arc from Neanderthal thirst to modern tap. It is wrong. The historian Jim Chevalier has written specifically to correct this exaggeration. Medieval people drank water. From springs they trusted, from wells that had a reputation. They knew, without germ theory, that some water was clean and some was not. They chose. They avoided suspect sources and used other drinks when they had to. That is not modern hygiene. It is accumulated observation. Now apply the same correction backwards. Neanderthals are usually cast two ways, either as brutes drinking from any puddle or as noble savages living in some untainted wilderness. Both are wrong. The pattern in their teeth shows selection, choice, preference for heated liquids and plant infusions over untreated water, not because they understood microbiology, because the ones who chose wrong stopped having grandchildren. The Neanderthal as stupid frame comes from a Frenchman named Marcellin Boulay, who in 1911 reconstructed the skeleton of an arthritic old man from La Chapelle-aux-Saints and decided the whole species walked hunched over. That reconstruction was wrong. It has been wrong for over 100 years. It is still what most people picture when they hear the word Neanderthal. The mouth at El Sidrón belonged to someone who selected poplar bark for a toothache. Not a brute, not a genius. A person solving a problem you have solved with ibuprofen this year. That is the payoff on the third promise. The medieval water myth and the Neanderthal brute myth are the same shape. They both flatten a story of quiet, patient, experience-driven choice into a slogan. The truth underneath is more useful. Neanderthals watched. They remembered. They selected. They passed the selection on. Now the second thread, the enzyme. In 2015, the biologist Matthew Carrigan and colleagues published in PNAS a study tracing a single mutation in alcohol dehydrogenase 4, ADH4, one of the enzymes the body uses to break down ethanol. Around 10 million years ago, in the common ancestor of humans, chimpanzees, and gorillas, that enzyme received one small change. A single amino acid substitution. The change made the enzyme roughly 40 times more efficient at metabolizing ethanol. 40 times. 10 million years ago is deep time, older than the human lineage, older than the split between our line and the chimp line. The mutation was carried by every descendant of that common ancestor, including the ancestors of Neanderthals, including your ancestors. Neanderthals carried the upgraded ADH4. Every Neanderthal skeleton in every European cave came with the same 40 times faster ethanol processor you have right now. Which means when a Neanderthal ate fallen fruit in a warm autumn wood in southern France 100,000 years ago, the fruit was already fermenting. The yeasts were doing their work. The pulp contained low-percentage ethanol, and her body handled it. We do not know whether she noticed. We know her body was equipped for it. Robert Dudley, a biologist at the University of California, Berkeley, proposed the framework years before Carrigan's data arrived. He called it the drunken monkey hypothesis. Not a joke title, a serious proposal. A hungry primate in a dry season eating fallen fermenting fruit gets more calories than a competitor who cannot metabolize the ethanol. The mutation was survival. That is the payoff on the second promise. The reason a Neanderthal could safely eat what a bark bucket did to a handful of berries overnight is the same reason you can drink a beer tonight. The enzyme is the same enzyme. It came from the same ancestor. 10 million years old. Which brings us back to your body. In 2010, a team led by Svante Pääbo at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology published the draft Neanderthal genome in the journal Science. First author, Richard Green. Follow-up work by David Reich and others confirmed the finding. Non-African populations today carry roughly 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. African populations, much less. Neanderthal genes for skin, immune response, hair, fat metabolism, and blood clotting are still running inside modern bodies. Every day. In you, if any of your ancestry runs through Europe or Asia, the taste on the roof of your mouth, the rejection cue. That system is older than Neanderthals, but some of the specific variants that shape it in you today came through them. Neanderthal versions of taste and immune genes still appear in modern non-African genomes. The receptor you just ran your tongue past has, at minimum, a family resemblance to hers. 2% sounds like a rounding error. In absolute terms, it is dozens of genes doing daily work. Immune system, skin, metabolism, taste. 40,000 years after the last Neanderthal died, some of the machinery that helped her survive contaminated water is still running. In readers of this text. Tonight. One last thing said straight. We cannot prove intent, only pattern. We cannot say the woman at El Sidrón understood why heated water was safer than pond water. We can say she was cooking her starches. We can say she was choosing plants that produced antiseptic compounds. We can say she was not drinking whatever she was thirsty for. The evidence is in her calculus. The choice is what it is. You do the same thing tonight when you fill a kettle instead of a glass. You do it when you order a coffee instead of tap water in a foreign city. You do it when the water in front of you does not smell right, and you put the glass down without thinking. That is not modern hygiene. It is a habit older than your species. Run your tongue along the roof of your mouth one more time. The taste is still there. The enzyme is still there. The 2% is still there. Here is the question. What is one drink you refuse without knowing why? Coffee too strong, milk from a certain carton, water from a certain tap. The refusal is data. It is memory older than you. Leave it in the comments. Somebody in there is carrying the same refusal from the same ancestor. Fire and bone is where we keep going into these questions. If this changed the way you look at the glass on your desk, stay with us.